I've lived a very happy life, with ups and downs, of course, as we all have, but it's been a very happy life altogether. And I met so many interesting people within the theatre, you know, with my father being the manager there. And before the war, they used to have different shows would come from, you know, maybe England or Scotland or from the south of Ireland, and the amateur operatics.
Yes.
They still came and did shows. The Ulster Operatic used to do every year they came. It was awfully fun. I remember they would be selling tickets for the ordinary theatre, you know, productions, and then they would be selling in a different place for the amateur operatics. And one of the men who worked there, front of house men, would say to the people, "This way for your tickets for Isle Anthony, and this way for your tickets for the Mickey Doo." Not the Mikado, the Mickey Doo.
Mickey Doo. And what other, do you remember any famous faces or anyone coming to the theatre?
Well, oh yes, well, most of the famous ones would probably have come before my time. But George Formby was there, and I'm trying to think of the others now. Well, Joseph Locke, my father really discovered Joe. He came to the house. We used to do, or he used to do, what was it? Auditions on a Tuesday morning, and you know, sitting in the word after 11, there was one wee man. He was like, I think he had shell shock or something, you know, and he was desperate. My father used to always say, "We'll let you know." And I remember one time we heard this one, and it was absolutely desperate, but it might have been that one. And we'd been rehearsing it, and we were going home, and we passed the entrance to the circle, and we could hear this awful voice singing, and we were kind of giggling at it, you know. And my father called us. He says, "Girls," he said, "just come down here a minute." He says, "Don't you ever do that again." He said, "I just say to that gentleman, we'll let you know, and he's happy with that. But don't you ever do that." Because he was a man who'd been through the wars.
Yes, he'd seen some things.
Indeed.
So, Sheila, when were you born?
1928.
And did you come from a big family?
No.
No.
Very small family.
It was just you and your brother?
Me and my brother.
Okay. And then your father was the manager of the Empire?
Yes.
We've been discussing. So, obviously, we've invited you here today because you've got a very special story about Sheila the elephant.
Yes.
So, do you want to tell me a bit about how you sort of came to know Sheila the elephant?
Yes. Well, we used to go to see the zoo, you know, and my father knew Dr. Hunter, who was very prominent in the zoo. And I'm not quite sure what his job was, whether he was to do the veterinary side of it or not, but he was a very big man in the zoo, and he knew him very well. So whenever they wanted to make a big thing of this christening of the elephant, and they thought that, you know, they were going to see my father as he would produce shows. And so they arranged that all the children of sort of north of Ireland early would be invited to this, you know, like for whatever near places there were. And they all came, and they were given lemonade and biscuits, so the little cafe at Hazelwood. And they had a lovely day with the christening. You know, I had a big crescent, silver crescent with, I think, flowers on it. And myself and a young lad, Gordon McNutt, whose parents owned the cafe at Hazelwood. He had to help me hold this, and we held it over the elephant, you know, and
Maybe this photo here.
That's it. That's the very one.
And that's you
the one.
and Gordon.
That's me there.
And the
yes,
elephant.
And the elephant, yes.
And then, do you know who this man is here?
That's Dr. Hunter.
That's Dr. Hunter, okay. And then that's your mother.
Let me see.
To the right there.
Yes, it is.
And do you know anyone else in the photo?
Possibly not. I think they were just sort of people who had come to watch it.
Who'd happened to be there?
Yes. No, I don't know anybody else. No, that was his big hat with a big brim. I remember him so much from that, you know. And we always thought it was as if she was covered with flies, but it was confetti that she had. So he helped me with that, you know.
And so, why did they decide to name the elephant after you then?
Well, it was whenever my father and Dr. Hunter were in my father's office one morning, and my dad had brought me in with him, and I was going to see the elephant for the first time in the zoo afterwards. And there were two of them were talking about it. They just couldn't think of a name for the elephant. You know, they tried all different things. And I apparently said, well, I would like to give her my name. So obviously said it was all right. That was it.
Great.
So. And
so then, soon after that, they had the big christening event?
They did,
okay.
Yes.
And so what sort of entertainment was there? Or?
Well, it was just really, in those days, they had a wee tram that used to go up from the Antrim Road up Bellevue, you know, because it was a very steep hill for people to walk up. And they had just all the eats. And then, of course, there was the rest of the zoo for people to see.
And I was told that there were other baby animals like lions.
Oh, there
and goats
were,
and
yes. I christened a few other animals, baby ones as well.
And do you remember any of their names?
I can't remember.
Too long.
Too long ago. Indeed, very long time ago.
And I was told then that all the children that attended the party were gifted a sort of toy Sheila.
Yes, yeah. Well, they were given little brooches, like a little elephant, you know, as a wee token of the event.
Okay. And what was obviously Sheila the elephant like?
Oh, she was a lovely little thing, and she would, you know, put her trunk up and would love you to sort of like give her a wee stroke. She was lovely. And stroked her. She would let you stroke her head. She was only very small, you know.
And I read an article that said that she refused to climb the stairs to the party, and you just had to move. Tell me a bit about that.
Well, I suppose she possibly looked on that as being a very difficult thing to do. Maybe, you know, I mean, animals are much more wary of things than we understand, aren't they? You know, they know everything about you. I think, you know, certainly with our dog, it's like that. But I would say that it was probably just that she didn't like the look of that. It's different, very different to going up just a straight slope, isn't it? You know, when you've got steps to go up.
Okay. And then you were telling us before you didn't actually know the elephant angel, Denise Austin.
No, I didn't know her at all. I didn't know that she did that.
So when did you find out about that? Was it more recently?
It was some years ago now, but it certainly wasn't even soon after the war.
Okay. And do you remember, did you sort of keep in touch with Sheila the elephant? Did you go visit her?
Yes, I did visit her regularly. I loved her, you know, and see, I always love animals anyway, love all animals, but she was very special.
I think everyone
She was my elephant.
Well, exactly. Okay.
I met another elephant as well, but not in the zoo. When the war started, my parents were worried about me being here because Hitler said he could wipe Northern Ireland out very easily. And so my father knew the owners of Fawcett Circus, and they were just during the war, they were just going to tour around Ireland, the south of Ireland. So I was sent to, go with them, and we had friends there. Mr. and Mrs. Fawcett had a beautiful caravan, and I went with them, and we went to different places all around Ireland. Every night it was on to a different village, and they were only allowed a very small amount of petrol during the war, so the caravans had horses that would pull them, to the next village.
It's a very atypical evacuation story.
Absolutely.
You ran away with the circus.
I didn't go to school at all. Okay. During that year, I was there with them for a year, but I learned how to ride a horse bareback, and I learned how to walk a tightrope.
Very good.
And I learned how to assist a magician.
Brilliant. So it's a sort of a different sort of education.
Different education.
Altogether.
Yes.
And you enjoyed your time, obviously.
Oh, I loved it. Absolutely loved it.
And do you remember any incidents or stories that happened during that time?
Yes, well, you know, they would go, when the winter time came, they had a big house in Wicklow, Mr. and Mrs. Fawcett, that they would go to, and they'd bring the animals. And you'd hear the lions roaring in their cages, you know, and things like that at night and what have you. But the villagers would come out, you know, people who were saw the show. The artists used to light a big fire and have, you know, maybe tea and maybe a burger or something like that. After had burgers in those days, I can't remember what we used to have. But and you know, it was lovely whenever they came, and there'd be stories told, you know, of various things that had happened, and many ghost stories, because, you know, of the night time and just the light of the fire and all that. It was lovely atmosphere. Lovely atmosphere altogether.
I suppose it's very disconnected from the war. It's been down south.
Absolutely, it was totally disconnected from the war. But then I did go to, after I'd been with Circus, I was evacuated. Not evacuated, my mother and I went just to stay in Newcastle for 2 weeks. And that was the week of the very big Blitz.
Okay, so that would have been Easter 1941.
Yes, it was. And I remember so well, we didn't have a telephone in the house where we were staying. And we could see the fire, the orange in the sky. And we knew my father and my brother were there.
Yeah.
And it was the next day we were able to get word that they were all right, but the house was damaged. We lived at Cliftonville, you know, and the enemy thought the waterworks was the docks, as you probably know.
Yes, it was very badly hit area.
Very badly hit area. I actually, some of the girls I went to school with, I went to school there down the Cliftonville Road at the Model, the girls' model school, and I lost some friends there.
Do you remember their names?
I do remember their names, some of them. There was Helen, and there was Muriel, and let me think now, Rosemary.
So they were three friends.
Three friends, yes, I was from my class, you know. But whenever the war first started, we were all allocated a house to go to. Each pupil was allocated a house to go to, and we all had to have gas masks, you know, and we carried them. You took your gas mask with you everywhere, and we were allocated a house to go as soon as the sirens would go, and it was like we'd have trial runs, and you know, just to make sure that would happen. And we would go, and the lady in the house would give us biscuits and lemonade or something like that. It was very nice. So we did do that, and then we also at the school every week every class had a big hamper, and we would collect either maybe some of the mothers would have knit socks for the soldiers, or sent some foodstuffs. And those who were in the classes, I remember there were 4 rows in each class, and the ones that were sitting in the front seats, the best, most clever pupils, they got taking the hamper every Monday morning to the barracks, wherever that was, nearby. I never got doing that.
No, you weren't in the front row.
The front row. I was not an academic. I could do anything with my hands or my feet, but not an academic by any means. But it was a happy enough time, you know. I was there for a couple of years.
And so then after you were in Newcastle for the big Blitz,
yes,
and then you came home again, do you ever remember any air raids?
Oh, I remember, yes. Funny enough, we had one of your speakers who came out to speak to us at Lisburn Cathedral, brought an incendiary bomb, and he held it up and he said, "Does anybody know what that's?" "Yes, it's an incendiary bomb." You know, I remember so well going home that night in the car. Father was allowed enough petrol to go up to the theatre and back again. That was all. And I remember these things coming down, and it was quite scary.
And where did you use a family shelter?
Well, under the table,
Under the table.
the dining room table, but there was an area shelter, but it was up at Cliftonville Circus, which was a good bit away from where we were. You know, I think we could have been well bombed by the time we got there.
You just decided to stay at home?
Well, yeah, to do that. There weren't all that many whenever I was there. You know, I was away with the circus, as I told you, and then away at Newcastle that time, but that was all. But there were some raids.
And then we were showing you that video of your mother speaking about your father in the Empire Theatre. Do you remember him talking about staying open during the Blitz?
Oh yes, he did indeed. He said, well, the night after the Blitz, there were 4 soldiers in the audience. That was all. That was the full audience. And he said, my father said, we're not going to close. We'll keep going. And they did. And I have a photograph there of the audience during the war, and most of them were in uniform. We played to pack houses every night, you know.
And so what sort of shows and what sort of things?
Review, it was a variety. I belonged to the dancing troupe, and we worked very hard. We had to take part in sketches as well and things, you know. But it was very well attended always.
And did you join the company sort of thing after the war, or was that during the war?
No, I joined in 1943. I was just coming 15 when I left school, which was just as well, because I hardly ever went to school. It was away, as I told you before, and I got 3 months off for appendicitis and things like that, you know. But and I didn't start till I was 7. Left when I was just coming 15. So, but I had a very nice life altogether.
And then your father was also a composer.
He was.
So I've heard about there was one particular song, How to Buy Killarney.
How can you buy Killarney?
Yes, and that was one of his most famous songs.
It was, yes.
Do you remember him? Would he sing, or would he?
No, he played a wonderful pianist, and he used to compose it on a mandolin. I can see him sitting at his office desk, you know, and he had a silver pencil that he used, and I had it clipped into his pocket, but he could hold it in his mind. He would, you know, do a few notes and then write them down, you know, and things like that. No, I remember him very well. He was a lovely man, and he used to tell stories on Children's Hour.
On the radio?
On the radio. They had Children's Hour from 5 to 6 so that mothers could get the tea ready without the children bothering them. Isn't that interesting, really? You know, they'd never think of that now, would they?
Do you remember sitting down and listening to your father?
Oh, yes. He used to tell me stories when I was going to bed. He'd tell me about the yoppet that lived in Scrabo Tower. That was a big bird. And I always believed, in fact, I still do believe there might be a yoppet up there. No, he was great at telling stories.
And what other things do you remember listening to on the radio?
Oh, all sorts of things. The McCooeys, I used to love listening to them, and plays. There was The Man in Black on Saturday nights. They always tell a scary story, you know. Loved that. Getting the fire lit and turning the lights down.
And what about any of the big wartime speeches or news broadcasts?
Well, I remember the day that war broke out, and my father called my mother and Gerald, my brother. He said, come, we have to be at 11 o'clock this morning listening to the radio. There's a very important announcement. And it was Neville Chamberlain, the Prime Minister in Britain. And he said, I have to tell you that we are now at war with Germany, you know. My father couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe it.
And sort of how did you feel at that time?
Well, I didn't mean much to me. I was only very young, you know. It didn't mean very much to me. Well, I knew it was very serious, and I knew my father was very upset about it. And, you know, everything changed very quickly. We, as I told you, we got those gas masks given to us, and then there was great big vats of water put in most roads, and the air raid shelters went up, and the barrage balloons.
Where do you remember barrage balloons in Belfast?
Oh, they were all over. You know, they were even up to Cliftonville Road, and you know, there as well, and they were quite low down to stop machine guns coming down to machine people. But I mean, you would probably know from the public library that I mean, I think it's only recently that they redid it, where all the machine gun.
Yes, the shrapnel in Belfast Central.
Bombs, yes, indeed. It was a very frightening time. I can remember in the theatre now that, you know, when we had a fire drill, and they used to use the old dustbins. They were like tinny kind of dustbins that everybody had, and you know, men would just get them and you know, bang them with something hard to warn people, as well as the sirens. Everybody get to the shelter or take shelter quickly.
And so, if there was a show on and an air raid happened, would they have evacuated the theatre?
I suppose they probably. I can't remember that ever happening when I was there. I can't remember that happening now. So I honestly couldn't tell you about that. I don't really know.
And then what about the blackout? Do you remember the blackout?
Oh yes, I remember that very well. You know, you were allowed to use a torch when you went out, but it had to be always pointing down, and you had to put a wee bit of cardboard in where the glass was, so it was just a pinpoint really to be able to see. And it was the same with cars. They had to do that, and of course it was all like sticky tape over the windows of the buses and trams, and the lights. The lights in the Cliftonville Road, I remember they were like horrible dark green colour, and the lights in the trams and buses were all like that as well. You know, it was terrible lighting, and of course you weren't allowed to have a chink of light showing out of your windows, or the warden would be at the door.
And was that your job to go around and make sure that all the blackout curtains were
Oh
down?
yes, they had to be absolutely. You know, had to be absolutely certain about that. Indeed. No, it was a very difficult time to live through, really.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there was the rations as well.
How did the rationing affect you and your family?
Well, whenever I was at school, we used to get it was 2 ounces of everything, 2 ounces of butter and 2 ounces of margarine. And we all had our jars, my jar, and I used to eat my 2 ounces of butter all at once. I thought that was nice, be able to do that, you know. But it was hard, and sweets, it was the same thing, 2 ounces you were allowed of those things. And there weren't very many, you know, sweets to be had in those days.
And were you given your sweet ration?
Oh, yes.
And so what would you have picked at the shop?
Oh, well, there was things that they used to make, like in shapes of maybe dice and dominoes and things like that we would play with them, you know. All that sort of thing. And then, of course, the things, sweets in bottles, and the poor shopkeepers had to go up the ladders to get, there was always sort of something at the top that you wanted, you know, all that sort of thing. Yes, there were mostly boiled sweets, as I remember, and there was some chocolate, but not a lot.
Okay. And was your mum a good cook?
She was a great cook, and the reason for that was that whenever they were touring, and see, after the war, my mother was a flying trapeze artist, and she left home at the age of 9, and she travelled. She was away for 17 years. She joined this troupe, and they travelled all over America. And she came home after the war. The troupe then broke up, and my father he was just demobbed. So he was working in theatres throughout Britain, playing piano sometimes for silent movies, and he would produce some shows as well. He produced a show during the war for their army unit, with Chesney Allen was in it, Flanagan and Allen, that comedy act. In London, in Victoria Palace in London, and he wrote a show for them there. But he had this concert party, and it was just do you remember a television show, It Ain't Half Hot, Mum?
Yes.
Well, it was on those lines. It would just be similar to that.
Yeah.
Just similar exactly to that, you know. Although he never saw that, obviously, because that was after the war. But it reminded me of that whenever I saw it on television. I thought it was great. You know, I loved watching that.
And would he have ever talked about his First World War experiences?
Never did.
Never
did. I know my brother went, he joined up in the Second World War, and with so many of his colleagues at school, they couldn't wait to join up. Unfortunately, they didn't all come back. But I remember my father saying, when Gerald came home on embarkation leave to go to India, and he said he thought he would never see him again. But he did, he came back. And unfortunately, my father died just a couple of months after he came back of a massive heart attack.
Terrible. End of an icon.
At the end of an icon. Well, he was made a director of the theatre, and he was down at the directors' meeting in Dublin, and they found him in bed, and he had died of this heart attack. It was just awful, but we had to go on with the show. Show has to go on.
Exactly, the old adage.
And that's just how it was, you know, and that's why we would have wanted it to be.
Did your brother ever talk about his experiences during the war?
Not a lot, no. They didn't seem to like talking about so many of the people who had been and seen awful things. Never talked about awful things. Talked about other things, you know, like snakes crawling into their bed and what have you.
I know the wee comical events.
Yes.
Sort of lightened the war for them.
I know, of course.
Okay. And do you remember when you were in Belfast, sort of after the Blitz, do you remember seeing blitzed out buildings and damaged buildings?
Oh yes, very much so. On High Street, the whole of that block in front of the Albert Clock, you know, going down to High Street really was just flat. And all over, I mean, there were so many buildings. I always remember my father saying that a friend of his said, he was all pleased because he had two shops, and he found that one shop had been flattened. But then he went, the other one had been flattened too. It's just one of those awful things, you know. Yes, it took a long time before things became anything like normal. My father wouldn't know the place today.
It's all changed, yes.
Oh, it's changed so much. Even in my day, it's changed.
And then was your house with the theatre, do you remember it being damaged during the war?
It was damaged, yes, during that Blitz on the waterworks, you know, where I lost my friends.
Yes.
They lived down near Manor Street. We were up just off Cliftonville Circus and Deer Park Road. We were nearer up the top of it. You know, people used to come up. You'd see when the sirens would go, there crowds of people walking up Cave Hill.
Just to get out of Belfast?
To get out of Belfast, yes. Especially in the middle of it.
And then obviously so many came back the next morning and their house was gone.
Well, that's just what happened. Just what happened. And maybe animals killed, you know, pets, things like that.
And you were telling me about your pet parrot.
Do you know, of course, what he did? I think I mentioned to you before about him letting himself out of the cage and going around the dressing. He used to go around the dressing rooms, and he called us one night. He shouted out, "Girls, you're off!" Now that means you've missed your cue, and we'd just come off and doing a number, and we're changing. It wasn't a quick change. We were taking our time, and we heard the call boy calling us. It was Ashby. But he used to make the noise of the bombs coming down, that whistling noise, which was very disconcerting. He would do that quite a lot. And he could sort of do the national anthem that he learned from the orchestra, you know, as the people were going out. And a wee number that my father wrote for people as they were walking out after the national anthem, and he could do that. He was an absolute character, he really was. He used to love you to scratch his head. I always did it with a pencil because he didn't like women. And he would have bit me. I told you he bit my mother's finger through. That's why he was brought down to the office. And he loved you to scratch his head behind his ear, you know, and he'd say, scratch a ball. And then the beak would come up as quick as lightning, you know. But it was the pencil he got.
So he never bit you?
No, he didn't bite me.
Very good.
He used to sit he would sit on a man's shoulder, you know, but he would have bit lady's ear.
And he was an African grey parrot?
African grey.
And where did your father obtain him?
He was given to him by a bookie called Hugh McAlevey, who was very well known in Belfast, all around Belfast. And Hugh McAlevey loved the theatre, and he used to come in an awful lot. And he gave my father a present of Ashby. So that's how we got him. And then we had Albert, the canary, who was in his little cage. And the two of them would go out in the cage together, in the big cage. They were funny.
Okay. And then the American Red Cross on Chichester Street would have been very close to your father's theatre.
It was.
Do you remember ever visiting, or do you remember seeing the GIs coming and going?
Oh yes, the GIs were very much in Belfast. The young men did not like the GIs because they took all the girls and used to bring them their nylon stockings and chocolates and all sorts of things. Yeah, and then we worked cabarets sometimes out at the American camps. My mother always came with us. We just went out. We are a troop of 10, but 4 of us would go at a time. And we always liked going because we were paid 2 guineas for that. 2 guineas, £2. You know what a guinea is?
Old money.
Old money, yes. We were paid for that, and and they always gave us a very nice dinner we would have, you know.
And do you remember any specific camps you went to?
There was one out at Toom that we used to go to a lot there. And they would all try to date us, you know. Will you come and cut a rug with me? On Saturday night at the Embassy Club, you know. No. Not allowed.
And do you remember, was that just the American camps you would have went to, or do you remember doing the same?
Yes, no, we only went to the American camps. I don't think we were invited to the other ones. I don't know why. It was the American camps that we did go to, yes.
I've been told, obviously, they had much better and much smarter uniforms.
Oh, they did. They looked very smart. I think a lot of girls fell for them. They did.
Did you have any friends that married GIs or dated them?
Oh, I did. I had one who married, and I think he turned out to be he was originally Italian. You know, in America, so many people from different countries. And he turned out to be an Italian count or something like that, you know. But, you know, there was a few of them married, yes.
And they went over to America?
Yes, they did, yeah.
Did you keep in touch with them?
Yes, I did indeed, yes. Bubbles, she was lovely. She was called Bubbles because she had very curly hair, you know. And she was lovely. We used to have great fun, you know, together. We were very great friends.
And did she work in the theatre with you?
She did, yes. And then our choreographer was a lady called Norma Barry. And she, as well as being a choreographer, she had a beautiful voice and she was lovely. She used to sing lovely blues, things like that, you know. She had a lovely voice. And whenever the trouble started over here, of course that was a long time after the war, but when the trouble started over here, my husband died very quickly and I had to earn something to keep my 2 children, so I started a children's dancing class and Norma lived near me and we did it together, and the 2 of us. And then we met up with one of the other girls who was doing one in Rascoon and we would put a show on, you know, for them in the old Grove Cinema.
So you've been a good dancer all your life then?
Yes. And I belonged to St Patrick's Church of Ireland in Jordanstown, and I used to put pantomime on every other year, and then I would put a show on the years in between. But they were hard work because I used to write the all the things that we did, and teach them dancing as well. Oh, it was lovely. I enjoyed it. Loved it. And
do you remember going dancing during the war?
What do you mean? To an ordinary dance? Do you mean?
Yes, like dances at the Flora Hall.
Yes.
or
Oh,
face
yes.
dance.
Yes. Well, we were very early off. You see, the thing is, we were usually working whenever all that was going on. But I have been to dances occasionally, whenever, on a very odd occasion that we would be off. Yes, I would have gone to those.
And whereabouts would you have went? Was it-
Well, White's was beside the Albert Clock, in one of those buildings there. I can't remember which one it was, and the Floral Hall, and then there was there was a big one, big dancing place in near the City Hall, in Chichester Street. Can't remember the name
In
of
the
it.
Plaza.
Plaza, very place.
That was the US Red Cross.
That's right. And we did some cabarets there were companies, like some of the big, like Gallagher's or somewhere like that, would have a dance every year, and then they would have a bit of entertainment. So we would go, again, we would get our 2 guineas to go and dance at that,
And what sort of dances were your favourite? Was there any type of style that you preferred?
Charleston, I loved.
Charleston.
I loved doing the dancing in Charleston. I loved tap dancing. Oh, we did it. We had to do every kind of dancing. Acrobatic dancing, and although not all that much. But I had learned to work with tightrope, remember, during the war. But yes, I loved doing that.
And was walking a tightrope very difficult?
Oh yes, I wasn't very good.
You didn't take after your mother on the
No, I
trapeze or anything?
didn't. Well, she was incredible. I mean, going away at the age of 9.
And would she have still been a trapeze artist when you were born and
No,
remember?
no. They gave that up whenever they were finished, and the troop disbanded. You see, her father was an old soldier. He has got a very distinguished medal, and for bravery during the war. That was the First World War. No, that was a way long before that.
Maybe the Boer
This
War?
tell you how old I am. Wasn't the Boer War, it was the one before it, the Zulu War.
So, obviously, you were evacuated with the circus for a year.
Yes.
Did you settle back into life in Belfast okay?
Oh, yes. Absolutely, I did. Yes, that was no problem. No problem at all.
And did you miss the circus?
Oh, well, I did, yes. I didn't miss certain things. I was fascinated with the pincushion man. He used to put needles, and through his eyelids and things. He fascinated me, all that sort of thing. And of course the magician, and I learned how all the tricks were done, of course, as I assisted him, you see. Had to roll up all the things and get them hidden away and whatnot.
And was this Billy McComb, or was this a different?
This was one. He made up as a Chinese.
Okay.
And he let his nails grow and painted them green, and he had like a Chinese sort of beard, and all that. And he'd wear the outfit just.
And what was his stage name?
It was Fu Manchu. I think that was what he called himself. Yes. But then he spoiled the whole illusion. He spoiled the whole illusion by at the interval. He would say to people, "And now, if you look at your programs, you'll see the numbers at the top corner, and we'll do the ballot now."
Oh, very good. And so, was it a big circus, Fawcett's?
It was a fairly big circus, yes, it was. It was. And they had 3 big lorries, to carry the scenery and the trapezes and things like that. And then they had an elephant there. That was where I met the other elephant.
Okay, and what was this elephant called?
It was called Nika.
Nika.
And she would have a pound of caramels, papers and all, before she would go on.
Make sure she got paid.
Yes. She didn't. Oh, she was lovely. And she put her trunk out the window of the van that she would be travelling in, She got out of the van when they were travelling one day, going from one village to the next, and frightened the life out of the villagers running through the village. I couldn't tell you where it was.
You just remember it happening.
I just remember it happening, yes, I do indeed.
And so would they have had other animals as well as?
They had a couple of lions. I think it was awful. When I think about it in circuses, that was a terrible thing, wasn't it? I don't hold with that at all now. I mean, I thought they were lovely, and I didn't realise the significance of them as a child, really.
At the time, you didn't realise? You didn't?
No, I didn't realise the cruelty of it, really, keeping them locked up like that. But I remember the lion tamer. He went to sleep one night. Maybe he'd had a few drinks or something. I don't know. And the elephants where she was, you know, and amongst all the straw, and she ate one of his shoes, you know, and he wasn't very well pleased about that. But anyway, just one of those things, you know. The elephant was lovely. She just loved putting her trunk out the window, and sometimes people would put something to eat, you know.
And then obviously there was a magician and there was horse riding.
Yes.
What other things were there on the circus?
Conjurers, you know, they would have all that sort of thing. Yes, conjurers and magicians, and they would have maybe a dancing act or a skating act. You know, they would have a ring that they would put there for that, so they could do that. A bit of dancing. I don't remember any tap dancing, but no, I don't remember that. But that they had some kind of dancing, and I think they would invite some of the audience, yes, to go up and, you know, do some kind of circle dancing with them or something, and encourage them to do that.
Okay. And do you remember during the war did you hear about, during the Blitz, that there were animals in the zoo that were killed in case they
Never heard
escaped?
about that.
No?
Never heard about that, and I'm glad I didn't.
No. Would have upset you?
Oh, I would have been mortified, really. I really would. I've always loved animals all my life, and I could never bear cruelty to them, you know. Unfortunately, you still see it happening.
Yes, unfortunately. And would you have known anyone that was in any of the services, like the ARP, the Home Guard?
Oh, yes. My friends, my girlfriend Muriel, her father would have been in the ARP, you know, and he worked a normal job. He worked in Gallagher's, you know, and there different things, and there were auxiliary forces and all that sort of thing.
And what about, were any of your friends in the Wrens or the WAF or anything like that?
No, not they weren't. I would have lost maybe touch with them being in the theatre.
Yeah.
You know, I would have lost because we, as I told you, we were and everybody else was off. We were working.
Yeah, exactly. You wouldn't have actually had time.
No, so we were just a family. The company was the family, our family, really. You know, whenever that was why whenever I got married, I had to give up my career because I was going out as my husband was coming in, which didn't work.
Yeah. And was that much after the war? Or?
It was. Oh, it was a good bit after the war, yes, indeed. 1951 I was married then, so it was a good bit. Although, funnily enough, I had to go down to Dublin to get material for my wedding dress.
Okay, tell me about that.
Yes. Well, I mean, there wasn't material. You could hardly get anything to make. People would cut up curtains. I remember that the old tabs in the theatre were cut up and made into costumes for us very often. We had a great wardrobe mistress, Mrs. Clark. You could have made anything.
But you often had to.
I had to, yes. Not only one costume, but she'd probably cut that up again and make something else, you know. So it was a very difficult time during the war for all artists and things like that. Different shows.
Would you have often gone down to Dublin or across the border?
Not really. We'd go down maybe to work in the theatre that was owned by the same man, the Olympia Theatre, and it's still going.
Okay.
So they were very lucky to keep that down there, but unfortunately, I believe the Empire was sold for £30,000. I think it was in 1961. That was the end of that.
Exactly. And so your wedding dress material, what did you buy down in Dublin?
I bought, it was net. that I bought, and it wasn't as white as I would have liked it. But you couldn't get things like that. You know, just had to do. You couldn't get little white buttons that were black, and I had to cover them, you know, with something else. I used to make a lot of my own clothes.
Very good. And how would you have got them back on the train then?
Oh, well, doing the material was all right, but I remember running to catch the train when it was actually going out to get my Hafner's sausages. Coming out of my pocket, I think, stuffing them all away into every crevice, you know, so they wouldn't be seen. Yes, the trains were stopped nearly, and the officers would get down and have a look through. Not always very thoroughly, but towards the end of time, whenever we were going up and down in the car, they didn't even bother stopping the cars. Maybe an odd one.
Yeah. And did you ever have anything confiscated?
No, never did. Never did have anything confiscated. We would bring up things like the sausages as meat things, I think. And then we would bring down stuff that they couldn't get. I think it was tea, things like that. I remember just after the war, there was a pianist came from England in one of the shows that my father was doing, and he said, "I can't believe it, they've got liver on view." He was expecting it all to be under the counter, you know.
I suppose it was a lot different in England compared to here with the ration.
Oh yes, it would have been. I would say it was probably much worse, because we could get things from the south of Ireland.
Yes.
As well. Oh no, I mean it was, and we used to have to put eggs in some horrible globular stuff.
This has been isinglass.
That's the very thing.
I've heard about this.
Have you?
Yes, and it would have preserved the eggs.
Preserved it, and when you take that, it'd be all glibbery and horrible, you know.
And then obviously the powdered eggs as well.
Powdered eggs. Actually, they were quite nice. I liked those.
Mm-hmm. And was there any other wartime food you remember? People have mentioned to me spam, obviously.
Oh, spam, yes.
Or mock banana. Remember that?
Yes, that was made out of parsnips, I think. As a mate, yes, and you get all these different flavourings, things. So it was an incredible time to live through the war, really. When you think about it, all the things that were confiscated.
And do you remember after the war getting your first orange or banana?
Oh yes, we told you about working cabarets on different camps and things. We worked cabarets sometimes on some of the big ships that came in, and I remember getting a banana, a few bananas given to me, and I went out on the street with this banana, and cars were stopping. Where did you get that? You know. So there we are, and an orange as well. I had.
Very good. And what about the end of the war? Do you remember celebrations for VE Day?
I do. I can remember them very well.
What did you do for them?
Well, my friends and we all met together, and everybody went out. Everybody was outside. I remember walking down the Antrim Road, crowds of people walking down the Antrim Road, and there was people. The uniformed people, you know, they were ecstatic. The young boys would come and kiss all the girls, and that's just how it was. People were ecstatic. It was just wonderful. Couldn't believe it was over.
And what about VJ Day? Do you remember anything for VJ Day?
Yes, well, but it wasn't as big,
yeah.
You know, because we'd already had this wonderful celebration. But of course, the war is still going on. That went on for, I can't remember how long. Maybe you could tell me.
So it was August, that the VJ Day.
Yeah.
And do you remember any sort of special shows or anything at the Empire to mark the end of the war or anything like that?
No, I don't remember any. Weren't any special shows, but my father did write. He wrote a lot of things about the war, about the men of Arnhem and all that sort of thing. You know, he did write
would have been short, like plays or scenes and things?
Yes, scenes, yes, and monologues and things, you know, like that. He was very, very, he was a great artist in that way, you know. He could really get to your heart with some words of some of the things that he wrote.
Must have been some
He was a
talent.
wonderful man. He was a wonderful man. I remember the cleaners said to me, the cleaners they were so nice. They had big rubber inlaid, sort of like on the foyer as you came in. And there was one particular Kitty, and Kitty was a very big lady. And she said, I love your daddy, for he always whistles me. Let us know that he was coming, you know. And we would just keep on with our work. But he was so popular. When he died, there's a big service for him in St. George's in High Street. And the people that were crying in there, it was amazing, amazing. My parents weren't religious people, but I think they had a faith, I don't know. But my father organised the Roman Catholic priest, Father Dean, from St. Malachy's in Montgomery Street, and Dr. Allwell from St. George's in High Street. And they used to come into the theatre every Monday night and come backstage, and any of the artists who wanted to speak to them, they were there for them. So he organised that.
Very cross-community way of thinking as well.
Absolutely. Oh, there was never anything. There was never any racist things. You know, like there is now.
Yeah.
Anything like that. Everybody was the same, as far as my father was concerned.
It's a good way to be.
I think it is. It's the only way to be, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. And then you were telling me before we started filming that you were in a film yourself.
Oh gosh, yes.
So tell me a bit about that. How did you become involved, and what was it called and things?
It was called Back Home in Ireland, and it was specifically made for the American market, to let people in America see what their boys had done, you know, over here. And our involvement in it was, we had to go to Larne. We were asked to go to Larne, and we did an Irish hornpipe on the harbour, and it was showing all these American soldiers. They were getting on board a boat to take them home, and they had to come and kiss us as we were supposed to be their girlfriends. You see, 12 of them, the dancers. Of course, they were all mobbing us, as you would probably guess. So they had to reorganise it, and we got it sorted in the end, you know. But we did a dance. This was supposed to be a hornpipe for them, and waving them goodbye as they left.
And what year would that have been that you?
Gosh, I don't know. It was whenever the Americans left here. Would it be 45, 46, was it?
The war ended obviously 45.
Yeah.
The Americans left in 44 a lot for D-Day.
Well, then that would have been then. That's when it would have been.
Okay. And then you were telling us as well that we actually have your photo up in the gallery, because you've met James McGuinness, the VC winner.
Yes.
So tell me a bit about what was he like?
He was lovely. He was a quite shy man, you know. But we just sort of like made him feel at home as much as we could, and he was just, and we couldn't believe that he was coming to see us. And my father called us. Our dressing rooms were upstairs, and there was a big lot of stairs down to where his office was in the corridor there, and he brought us all down, and some of the other backstage people and everybody else involved. All there, and James was in the middle of us all. And I think we're nearly crushing him there. And we just gave him as nice time with us as we could. He really was given a great accolade from us all.
Very good. Well, are there any other memories, any other stories you can think of from the war?
Well, I remember Field Marshal Montgomery's mother came to see the show once, and we made a great fuss of her. She came over, you know, remember she very well, and we had the Princess Royal came to see the show. That was she was Countess Hereward, the Queen who has just died, her aunt. She would have been. And she came to see the show, and that was a great honour for us, really, you know.
Must have been very exciting for you.
It was very exciting. I remember Father brought Jimmy O'Dea up he was a great comedian now, he's a wonderful comedian. But he lived down in Dublin, and he worked in the Gaiety Theatre, mostly in Dublin. And he came up here and was in that performance. I used to go and stay with him sometimes and his wife, and they were very nice to me as a child. It was a nice treat for me to go down there where the lights were on lit and everything, you know. And they always made great. I remember they had a car that he had with a teas made thing that came made to the back of the front seat. Very, very luxurious, you know. But they had a very nice time down there with him. He was very funny. He used to dress up as Biddy Mulligan, the pride of the coombe. He was very, very funny.
It sounds like a really lovely childhood that you had.
Oh, I did. I had a wonderful childhood. Very, very much so. And then it was nice going down to Dublin, because the people in Dublin were so different to people up. No, everybody, it's like in England. Midlands people are different to southern people and northern people, aren't they? You know, everybody's different. And I loved to love listening to them in the markets and everything. You know, there was a market in Moore Street and just off Henry Street in Dublin, and I just loved. I remember going down there one day, and the women, you know, they'd say, "Will you, if you want the fish, will you buy it and stop mauling it?" You know, and somebody else was shouting, "10p each the orange, no, 2p each the oranges, and 10p a glass the peas." They were sold by the glass. But you know, you get all that sort of thing, and then you get. That was, you know, we were travelling then, and it was nice because you didn't travel during the war. There was nowhere to go.
Yeah.
Nowhere different to go. And that was it. So if we had a holiday at all, we would probably go down south, you know. But we very rarely got a holiday. As we were told, our lives were one big holiday. Well, they were, because we loved what we did. I loved dancing, still do. But I can't dance anymore.
It was long hours and tough work, but it was enjoyable.
It was very, very hard work, yes, because we changed the show every week, so we had to learn new things every week. Just loved it all. Loved it all.
Well, thank you very much for speaking to me, and thanks for calling out and telling us all about your memories today.
It's been a great pleasure, Michael, a great pleasure indeed. And it's made me think of things I've forgotten about as well.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Thank you.